Have you ever wondered, ever wondered?
Transforming the face of psychiatry, Dr. Judith Orloff asserts that we are keepers of an innate, intuitive, and empathic intelligence so perceptive that it can help us heal and prevent illness. Yet these qualities are often disenfranchised in conventional health care. Dr. Orloff is proving that the links between physical, emotional, and spiritual health can't be ignored. Nation magazine calls her one of the frontier people in healthcare who is unsatisfied with the existing order and pushes for an expansion of knowledge. The Los Angeles Times calls Dr. Orloff a prominent healer. She's also a New York Times bestselling author of The Genius of Empathy, The Empath's Survival Guide, Thriving as an Empath, and Emotional Freedom. Dr. Orloff is a psychiatrist, an empath, and an intuitive healer, and is on the UCLA Psychiatric Clinical Faculty. She synthesizes the pearls of traditional medicine with cutting-edge knowledge of intuition, energy, and spirituality, and passionately believes in the power of integrating this wisdom for total wellness. Dr. Orloff has been called the godmother of the empath movement. She specializes in treating empaths and highly sensitive people in her private practice. Her work has been featured on The Today Show, CNN, Oprah Magazine, The New York Times, and USA Today. She has spoken at Fortune Magazine's Most Powerful Women's Summit, Google, TEDx US, and TEDx Gateway Asia. The New England Journal of Medicine writes, Dr. Judith Orloff advises physicians on improving their intuitive powers. Her simple but powerful message is, listen to your patients. So it is a delight to have you, Judith. And I've always been a really big fan of your work. And so I'm going to start out by asking, as a conventionally trained physician, you're also an empath. So can you describe what an empath is?
Yeah, so I'm a psychiatrist. I got my training at medical school at USC, and I graduated my residency training at UCLA. And I was never, I was taught how to give out medications and the biological underpinnings of behavioral science and how to treat people with meds, but I was never taught how to develop my intuition, to expand my empathy, so I can really feel what's going on with patients. And so what I do now in my life and what my whole life has been devoted to is integrating the intellectual, traditional, scientific, psychiatric method with being an empath. And an empath is somebody who is extremely empathic, and yet they're like an emotional sponge. They can pick up emotions from other people and take it on inside their own body. And they tend to get overwhelmed or exhausted by too much stimulation. And their gifts are many: intuition, connection to nature, loving people, being able to be compassionate for other human beings, maybe too much so sometimes, the ability to love in a deep, deep way. And so I wrote the Empath Survival Guide to give people tools who are sensitive, who are empathic, how you can be empathic without taking on the stress of other people or the world.
Yes. I can see how that is so important for physicians too, to understand that personality type, because if you would, I would think it'd be easy to misdiagnose or to, and I've heard you talk about that, which is really fascinating, the way some people will come to you and maybe they're on the medications are not right because they, haven't been diagnosed properly.
Oh, that's the big travesty in medicine, is that there isn't a word for empaths. There's not a concept for empaths. And so empaths get traditionally misdiagnosed as panic disorder, fibromyalgia, Epstein-Barr, major depression, major anxiety, or panic attacks. And so anybody who is going through those kinds of situations need to take the 20-question empath assessment test in the front of the Empath Survival Guide to determine if they're an empath. See, the question isn't even asked, but I want to report a victory where I was interviewed recently for psychiatrist.com about empaths.
Yay.
And yay. I mean, it's happening.
Great. Good.
Yeah.
And I was going to follow up with that. Have you seen a change, an opening up in the medical community a bit here? It sounds like.
I have seen a change in terms of functional medicine is a new subspecialty that has developed in the last decade, where the functional medicine docs are very open to energy medicine and empath and being able to treat with conventional therapies, but way beyond it, to be able to ask if you came into me and you were feeling anxious or panicked and you were feeling exhausted, I would ask you a few questions from the assessment test. Are you an empath? Just to get a baseline, because you don't want to miss that. You don't want to miss that. If somebody's an empath, you've got to, as a psychiatrist, I've got to address it. And that's why it's so useful to just have the concept in mind, everyone who's listening, to have that concept that it's real. Many empaths feel like they're going crazy and there's something wrong with them or weird. I was brought up by 2 physician parents and I had 25 physicians in my family, very linear, logical, wonderful people. But I was told as a child, just get a thicker skin. You're too weak. You're a weakling. Why are you taking on all this stuff from other people? You have to get stronger. You have to get a thicker skin. And so I grew up believing there was something wrong with me.
And I want to say your book. So I have them all here because they're fabulous books, but the story of you growing up in this family with, physicians, and you would go to the shopping mall and tell us a little bit about that. It's like as an empath, you took on not just the emotional, but the physical feelings of people. And your folks, as wonderful as I'm sure they were, they just didn't know, how to deal with that. But this is a fabulous book for people to read about Judith's journey. And one of the things that you talk about in your work is that if empaths don't understand and they don't have the tools to calm themselves down, that many times they will turn to drugs, alcohol. It makes so much sense because that sort of helps them deal with the emotions that they don't understand. They're too strong. So you went through a little bit of that in high school, right?
Oh, I did. When my parents finally said, never mention your intuitions again at home, I was forbidden to talk about any of this. And so I was an only child. I had no one else to talk to. I had no support whatsoever. So all I knew was I wanted to get rid of it. There was something wrong with me. So it was in the late 60s where I turned to drugs, as so many people were doing in that time, just to calm everything down. For me, it calmed everything down and it made me able to go to parties with my friends and, do all kinds of adventures. Whereas before I would have felt a little overwhelmed and uncomfortable. And, I want to say as an empath, a young empath, this is true of many empath children, I was incredibly lonely.
Oh.
And so those of you out there, if you have children who are sensitive and empath, just have compassion for that. You feel alone. You feel nobody understands you. It's not a pity party. It's just confusion.
Yeah,
it's just pure confusion. Like, what's going on with me? I remember as a child, I want to say, I no longer feel that way. I am very proud of being an empath, and I'm proud of my medical background. I'm proud of every part of myself. But the key is to integrate it all. For those of you maybe who are beginning empaths, just go to the Empath Survival Guide and take that 20-question quiz.
Yes.
It's not rocket science to diagnose yourself. And if you have, a certain number of yeses, then you are an empath and you need to address that in terms of your own mental, physical, and spiritual health. It's essential that you do. Otherwise, you're going to be run over by life and not know what's happening or misinterpret what's happening.
Yes. And I wish so much I'd had these tools when my kids were young. because my one of my daughters is definitely an empath, and I even though I think I had like 16 out of the 20, but of answers to your questions. But I know if I had known more about it when she was a child, I would have been able to understand her better. It's just so important, I think, that parents get your book and read for themselves and their kids. So
Parents need to be educated how to treat their sensitive child. For instance, if you're giving a little social gathering and the child isn't coming down and socializing, but hanging on the steps up there watching, let them do that. Don't make them, don't force them
come down and play the piano in front of everybody, right?
Yeah. Don't force them to come downstairs. Let them muse, let them look. They love to look. They love to observe. That it's a very creative state. So you need to enhance the creativity of your children. And sometimes they like to be alone, maybe more so than other children, and they don't like video games because empaths are very sensitive to sounds. It's a very crass, horrible sound to me to hear a video game. However, if someone wasn't an empath and they were into all this noise and chaotic input, they like it. It keeps them, the sense of being alive, of connected. But empaths are very different.
Yes, that's marvelous. So I'd love to talk about some of the neuroscientific findings that explain the empath's experiences.
Well, the neuroscience is so interesting, and I keep learning more and more about it. It's really fascinating. But basically, there's the neuron system in the brain, and that is a network of neurons that are called the compassion neurons. And it's thought that empaths may have hyperactive mirror neuron system more so than other people. So everywhere you go, you're feeling compassion for people, or you don't even know them. You're feeling compassion for people, or the unhoused, for people suffering and any oppressed people. You just feel it. And there's nothing wrong with feeling it, but empaths take it on in their bodies. So by the end of the day, they're spent.
Yes.
It's not healthy to do that. And so part of the skills, and the mirror neurons are firing a lot. So that's what the thought is. But the skill is learning how to give and learning how to have boundaries. When you're tired, you don't want to give to everyone. It just makes sense. You don't want to give to everyone. You want to take time out for yourself, and you want to go into your bedroom. Empaths need alone time, or you need to go into any room that's quiet where people won't bother you. I have a keep out sign on my bedroom. So nobody can come in. I don't want them coming in. I don't want knocking. I don't want hovering. I just want to be left alone, period. And it's not anything negative about them.
Right.
It's all about me. And that's what I try to counsel my patients is that, when the mate is dealing with the other mate who's an empath, they shouldn't take that personally. It's not personal. The empath taking care of him or herself.
And you have some fabulous tools to offer people. And one of them that I began to use, it's helped me so much. If I feel overwhelmed in a crowd, to go in the bathroom and your exercise where you put your hand on your heart and you think of someone you dearly love, that is just so powerful. And I've done that before. And I think, of course, of my husband, but also my grandkids. My grandkids, so I put them in my heart, and it's just been transformational for me to have that tool. And there's other tools I'd love to have you talk about that you enumerate in your book, like breathing and that sort of thing.
If ever you're in doubt what to do, just begin to breathe. Don't hold your breath, because if you hold your breath, you're holding in all that stress or fear or whatever you're experiencing or anxiety. You want to say, all right, just cue yourself to just breathe in, breathe out, breathe in. So that begins to center yourself. You see, empaths need centering tools. So they're just not flying all over the place with all the input coming in. And when they're on sensory overload, that's extremely painful. It's extremely painful to have too many things coming at you too fast. And another a tool is never make any decisions when you're on sensory overload. Wrong time. You need to get yourself in a quiet situation and reduce stimulation immediately. That's part of self-care. That's part of what you have to do. You can't break up with anybody. You can't leave your job. You can't, even though you might feel it at that moment because you're so overwhelmed, you can't take it anymore. Just quiet it all down and revisit it later. Constrain yourself from sending any emails or making any premature declaration.
Right. I so love your approach and this holistic way that you deal with the person, the soul, the human being, and the way you bring in your empathic skills and your intuition. Question: have you had pushback from sort of the more traditional, maybe medical community? I don't think with this functional medicine, which is just fabulous. It's so good to hear that it is incorporating a whole body approach. But when you first started talking about your research and how you combine these, methods, did you have some pushback from people?
Of course, but my attitude, and it's so many doctors are evolving. I want to say that too. I have great hope for the medical profession. But I want to say when I started out, nobody was doing this. So they never heard of anything. But my attitude, I am so happy to be a physician. It is my life's path. I love it. I respect other doctors. I don't need them to believe in this. I would hope that they might be open to it, but I never tried to force anybody or coerce or convince. That's never been my way. And my way has always been just do what I believe in, share with people, and everyone will come. I've learned that over the years where people just flock to me, doctors, nurses. I've given retreats for healthcare professionals. I've spoken at the American Psychiatric Association. So I'm not out for a fight. I really am not. But, and I'm not out to convince anybody that they have to believe this. It's just the poor patients that suffer. So it's changed over time too. Like the really adamant ones I've had come to me 5 years later, said, no, I'm thinking about it.
Great. That's so exciting. And kudos to you for just taking those steps forward because it's such important research that the world needs it. And so you just do what you're called here to do. Right?
I'm very blessed to be living my life's path. And when you do that, things come to you that I go after things, but a lot of things just come. Things I never would expect would come to me. And I'm always in awe of it. I really was not losing hope, but didn't have high hopes for orthopedic surgeons. They're just been very difficult, in terms of the ones I've met in my life. But I met one recently where I had to go in for something. And this man, he goes, I look at every patient as my first patient. And I go, really? Why is he telling me this? I don't know. But I just said, that is so incredible. As an orthopedic surgeon, I don't meet many people like you. Important to connect quickly with people. I'm like, wow.
That's great.
In my ears.
Exactly. The transformation, I think, because I think people have sort of demanded it in a way, just everyday human being, they're reading a lot more. And so they know these modalities or whatever are out there and they read about them. And so tell us, what is the difference between an empath and empathy?
I look at empathy as being on a spectrum, and my new book, The Genius of Empathy, is about empaths and empathy and how to apply empathy as a healing tool in your life, because I believe it's an incredible healing tool. And I'll get into the differences, but there's something called the Mother Teresa effect, where the scientists have found that if you witness an incredible act of empathy, that will decrease your stress hormones and begin to heal you. By simply witnessing a beautiful act of empathy where your heart goes, you begin to heal. So the empathy is the secret ingredient to healing division.
And you talk about, feel like empaths, are here to help heal the world. And And if we are able to adopt, even if a person isn't an empath, if they can adopt some of those characteristics, it will help us bridge these huge gaps are in society now.
Yeah, because empaths know because they're able to sense that we're all connected. It's not a matter of debate. It's not a matter of science research studies. It's a matter of we just know. And so we have it easy in that respect. We're not fighting that battle of not knowing that our whole human race, the good, bad, and the ugly, we're all part of the same family.
Yes.
And there's a little bit of good and a little bit of bad in most people. But being an empath is on a spectrum. Empathy, which is the everyday, I feel, oh, I'm so sorry you're going through that. Thank you for sharing. What a happy moment. That's in the middle of the spectrum. That's the beautiful everyday empathy that many people experience. Then if you go a little bit higher on the empathy spectrum, you get the highly sensitive person who is very loving and sensitive to noise, smell, sound, sights, and sensory overload. They're very sensory oriented and very, they need to have quiet, beautiful environments, preferably in nature. As they go into the city, it's just too much for most of them. And then empaths are the highest on the spectrum because they have all the sensory overload aspects and they tend to be emotional sponges and they tend to absorb. That absorbent sponge-like quality has pluses and minuses that you have to work with, that I'll teach you how to work with because I had to learn how to do it for my own body and my own self. And then at the very bottom of the empathy spectrum, you have the narcissist, sociopath, and psychopath who have empathy deficient disorder, meaning they're wired neurologically different to not feel empathy as we know it, which is mind-blowing. It's hard to absorb for many empaths, but they're at the bottom of the spectrum.
Yes. That brings on a question about empaths that are at the high level. I'm fascinated with the psychics that, some seem incredibly tapped into something, right? And so do you think at the very top of that might be a personality that has some so empathetic that they can tap into another level, maybe of truth, the collective unconscious, whatever. What do you think about that?
Oh, yes, definitely. And you don't have to be in a higher level. It's called an intuitive empath. And I'm an intuitive empath, and you have very strong intuitions about things, and you're very tuned in to the flow of life and in synchronicities and deja vus. You walk into a room and you feel like I've been here before, or that person over there, I know them, but I know I've never met them in this life. You have all kinds of communications with plants and the earth, feeling the movements of the earth. It's intuitive empathy is a deep form of connection to people, to yourself, and to nature. And yes, many things are possible. There's a dream empath, which is part of being an intuitive empath, where you just have always been a dreamer. Maybe since you've been little, you've written down your dreams like I have. But you like to listen to your dreams or it intrigues you. You want to learn how to do it and listen to the guidance in dreams. And so all of that is an outcropping of the sensitivity of the empathy.
Yes, that's beautiful. So tell us the difference between connection and attachment. I think that's really fascinating because, a lot of us connect, but then can turn into an unhealthy attachment to ideas and things.
Oh, that's so true. Attachment is like this. Connection is like kind of this.
Yeah.
Attachment is when you just attach to someone or something, and that can backfire. I understand the impulse behind it, but it can backfire. You don't ever want to squeeze the blood out of somebody. You want to, if ever you notice that you're tensing up or you're afraid or you're panicking over, let's say, something your child did, or there's a health challenge, if you notice that, again, take a breath, you could connect, but not attach. And how to do that, I write about in The Genius of Empathy, the art of loving detachment versus
Yes.
attachment, where you just take one step back. And just that one step can bring you a lot of relief and a lot of clarity. But if you don't, and you jump into the person's body and you're enmeshed with them, that's
Yes.
problems.
And I think you talk about energy vampires and how, if you come into that space when you feel like your energy is being sucked out, again, use those tools that you have so beautifully written about. And tell us, maybe enumerate on that, how, say you walk into a room and somebody comes at you and you feel like I'm losing all my energy to this person. How do you deal with that situation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a whole chapter in the book on that, because that's so important. As empaths tend to overgive and spend too much time with people who are draining them. They'll just sit there because they're afraid of being impolite.
Yes.
And you have to learn how to say a positive no. And you have to learn how to get out of situations. That's a basic skill of being an empath. You can't just stand there. So if somebody comes up to you at a party, let's say they're a chronic talker, and they've cornered you and they're jabbering away and they don't take any breaths, so you can't make it. There's no room to do anything. And then when you take 2 steps back, they take 2 steps forward. So it's a no win for empaths. And so what you have to do, and this is really hard, is you have to interrupt. You have to say, I'm so sorry I'm interrupting you, but I really need to go to the bathroom right now and I've got to excuse myself. So that's a socially acceptable excuse. They'll go, oh, okay.
Yes, I'll let you go.
I'll let you go, right? Go.
Yes.
Or
Yes.
you can say, I've enjoyed talking to you, but I've got to go over and I have another commitment right now. Great talking to you. Bye.
Yeah. Yes.
It's not being insincere. It's being polite.
Yes.
It's like just getting yourself out. There's this new movement in the world. You have to call people out for their behavior. Call people out. I've heard that. And, no, not in these cases. You want to have respect for people. They're not committing a crime. They just are not aware of their behavior, or they control it. It's just, you want to get out and still have the namaste effect, which is,
Yes.
I like you. You talk too much, but I respect the spirit within you. Bye.
And again, protecting ourselves so that we, can function on a high level ourselves and protect spirituality. And one of the things you talk about at empaths, empaths can be really powerful spiritually. And I think about that a little bit. I think that's really beautiful what you say about that.
Oh, yes. The empath has an innocent heart. The empath has feelings that they have learned to work with in the beginning. And an empath who meditates and is able to connect with themselves and to connect with, let's say, a higher power, whether that be nature or just the power of love or a religious figure. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as you can connect to something higher than yourself. And you could begin to connect with the larger universe. And you might call it mystical. You might, whatever word you have for it, but it's the greater universe beyond the ordinary. And empaths, because of their sensitivity, if they can get quiet and have a nice sacred space with candles and flowers and begin to open up their hearts, they can begin to learn the mysteries of the universe, because they're feeling into the different dimensions that are there. They're not just stuck in their minds. Most people live in their minds all the time. So they're not really privy to this realm, though it's here all the time. It requires a shift in energy to take that time to not be with anybody else and meditate and do your best to tune in to whatever it is out there that's bigger than you. It might be a leaf on the tree. It might be your little doggy who's looking at you with unconditional love. Whatever it is who can get you there, you want to have those kind of icons around you.
Yes. And you say that because of that, I think empaths can save the world. We need them right now. So
I think so. That's what I believe. I think that empathy is the key to healing division and to healing hatefulness. And, basically people want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to be valued. All right. And this is every person except for maybe the narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths. They don't respond to the same cues we do. But aside from that group of beings, the rest of us, that's very basically, if you get beyond the resentments, you get beyond the anger, you get beyond, whatever grudges they're holding. Basically, they just want to be seen and heard. And if you could make somebody just say, I hear you, I hear you. Let me think about it some more. And that's the way to get out. I hear you. But to give somebody, maybe that you don't even like, that, I hear you. Thank you. And I'll think about it.
I can't wait to read your new book, The Genius of Empathy, Practical Tools to Heal Yourself. Is that, and let's see, your relationships in the world. Is that one of the reasons you wrote this next book? I'm just sort of, throwing that out to help the world take on some of these characteristics or consider them in healing, not only yourself, but the political system, the world, everything in the world right now.
It'll work for everything except for the narcissists, full-blown narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths. So I don't know how many of those are in the political system, but the ones that aren't that, it could help. But the ones who don't have empathy, they have a crippling. They're crippled. They're another version of human. So it's not just those with narcissistic traits. I want to make that clear, who might be self-absorbed, or other things. But these are people with empathy deficient disorder, meaning they're not wired for empathy. They don't really care about your feelings. And they, have transactional relationships based on power. You see, that's a very different dynamic than relationships based on wanting to connect. I want to feel important. I want to be seen. If that's down deep underneath all the bravado that some people might put out in the world. But if you really you want to sit with them. I've sat with people for, my whole career. So, if you sit with them, that's what's going to come out.
So your new book, it comes out in April, right? And so have you started to do, seminars or probably book promotions a little early now, right? But
I'm doing,
Are you?
I'm trying to do teachings online to, pave the way for the book. And you can get the pre-order book now. And I talk about different parts of it. I'm giving an online course starting in November with the Shift Network.
Oh, great.
On the principles of the book. And it's a 7 course, one day a week, and you could watch it at your convenience. And I'll put the information on my website.
Yeah. And we'll have it at the end too, Judith. We'll have all your information. Yeah. Well, that'll be fun. I'm going to have to do that. It starts when? In November then?
It starts the end of November, and with some breaks over the holidays, it goes through the end of January.
Okay. Well, I will do that. And so one of the goals that you say that you have is to protect sensitivity while maximizing benefits. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, sensitivity is a precious, precious trait compared to, let's say, someone who has no sensitivity or no empathy. Scary, and empaths tend to get into relationships with them too because they get taken by their love bombing or manipulations, and they misconstrue who that person is if they don't have the skills to identify them. But what you want to do is be an empowered empath. You don't want to be just, everything is just too much. I've seen so many, and I felt that way, believe me. But, it's time to be strong, everybody. And I don't mean not empathic. I mean, be as empathic as you can. Learn as many skills that you can learn. Saying no, setting boundaries. If you're triggered, learning to work with it, not getting into arguments with people and defending yourself endlessly. Learning how to seek out the ones that can hear what you're saying and connect to them, build community. So being an empath now, it's critical. We need to hold hands, all of us,
Yeah.
thousands, and I don't even know how many people are out there. I have an empath support group on Facebook. I have 20,000 just in that group,
Right.
And so we need to all hold hands together and know that you're not alone, and know we're all together, and know we have very similar challenges, and that some people may be further down the line than you. So you need to use them as mentors. And that's what I like to do in my online workshops. I mentor people in the Q&A section where they could ask me questions and I could guide them in that particular situation that they're in. And so just hearing the mentoring, they're learning that, and then they could begin to do it themselves for others.
And I see that on your online. So I'm part of your Facebook online group. It's like people are helping one another. Somebody will say, I had a panic attack or whatever. The graciousness and the generosity and love that comes through that is just so lovely. Because I think as empaths, it's easy to want to just sort of become a recluse because you're overwhelmed with the problems of the world. And it's a lot easier to just say, I'd really rather live in a cabin in the woods and not think about all the difficulties and be overwhelmed with all the energy. So thank goodness for your work. And like I say, your Facebook page is a marvelous tool too for people.
It's called Dr. Orloff's Empath Support Community.
A lovely group of people there too. So yeah, no, I just want to thank you again, Judith, for your incredible work. It's really touched a lot of lives, and you're just getting started. I can't wait till this new book gets out too. So
Thank you.
You've been absolutely marvelous, and I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day for us.
It's great to meet you, and this is
Me
a great
too.
podcast. I'm so glad you're doing this.
Thank you. Thank you, Judith. Thank you for joining my interview with Dr. Judith Orloff. If you would like to learn more about Judith's work and her exciting new book, The Genius of Empathy, go to my website, www.haveyoueverwonderedpodcast.com, and find her name under the guest list.
Have you ever wondered? Ever